Hey, Darryl, welcome to the Z Learning Podcast. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Zev. Always a pleasure.
My pleasure. Really quick, for those who don't know who you are, give us a little bit about you and your background.
Great question. It's always fun to shape it in 30 seconds or less. But yeah, I'm a digital media content strategist and marketer that has done 25 years of work in sports. Worked with the NHL previously for 2 decades, and now am running my boutique consulting shop here out of the Upper East Side of Manhattan, really doing some fun startup work, work with some nonprofit organizations, and play that strategy and operations marketer within some of these new companies, these early stage ventures.
And would you describe yourself as a sports marketer? Also, maybe the microphone, just put it a little closer, just so we can hear a little better. Yeah.
Yeah, I would. I'm definitely a sports marketer with that editor, that content operations hat. I am I've partnered with tons of marketers within corporate America, and now as a consultant for the last 2.5 years. But certainly, I love driving marketing programs and building that roadmap, understanding what the brand message is, what platforms we need to be on, and what that communication and messaging is.
Awesome. And I know that in a former life, you had a background in the NHL, and you've worked with a lot of sports related startups and teams and major brands. Curious, why do you think people follow a team, or what do you think engenders loyalty? Like, you know, why are people such fanatics for their teams?
Well, one, sports is really the ultimate drama. So if you're having any interest in anything, you want to be rewarded, and usually the rewards come from a great engagement at an event, or you learn about the personality, or you got to celebrate a win in person with your buddies or your friends, your dad. There's the parades. There's a lot of experiences on TV and bars that really focus on sports and that community piece. So I think sports are then, and the fandom's usually handed down from generation to generation. Some kids, similar to the Taylor Swift effect in football, start learning about a new sport through their idols or those celebrities that they follow, maybe some influencers on social media. But really, I know my connection, and about 70%, I think, I've seen a recent study, are fans by age 14 because it was their dad, their uncle, their sister, their brother that always loved and watched sports, and they remember some of the good fun memories together. So I think that's how I would phrase that.
Well said. And I think the key word you used there was community. I think sports and sports fandoms are one of the last places left in America, the Western world, where a sense of community often still exists. Aside from the fact that some of us are born into a family where there's a certain team and that's the one you root for, or you grew up in a certain city, um, or a state, and you kind of default to the local. Or in some cases, I know people, they like a team that is not from where they are, either because they were dominant in the time when they were growing up, so like a front runner, fair weather friend, whatever, or they like the symbol on the helmet or whatever. I've
Right.
heard a lot of stories like that. And so they supported for life. But I'd say that teams and sports often have kind of the best lessons in brand building. I mean, this is like the ultimate brand. So how can teams, any sports teams, how can they really build community around their brand?
Well, they got to get to know their fans on a really emotional level. There's lots of teams that will try and leverage some transactions, and a viral, or almost a viral moment on social media. But there's lots of noise, confusion. Not everyone's on a platform all at once at the same time. There's things that are getting in the way between, trolls and algorithms. And then when you talk about in venue, everyone's now trying to go to a concession stand or the bathroom, and some people are on their phones trying to capture content. Some people aren't even paying attention when there's a TV timeout. So really, with everything going on, I think the more that a team understands about the people that are consuming their product, either in venue or from their couch, on a real emotional level, to build more of that authentic relationship and get away from a lot of that, that noise and confusion of social media, and some of and really hone in on what good content or what makes a positive experience, or do you like to overindulge in a certain personality, or an extension of our brand. Maybe it's tailgating. Maybe you became a fan of a certain team because you were at a great tailgate party, and that was so much fun, and you want to always go to games. But maybe it's the sport itself is too violent. Let's just say there's so many things that you start trying to figure out. I think all marketers do this. Is how can you really build a good wholesome engagement, and have fans consume and stick around through thick and thin, through bad season, through good season, through the off season, through that pre-event for the big game, during the event, the aftermath. All of that stuff is, you have to bring some level of consistency and cohesiveness, and there's too much that's disjointed. So that's really community building 101, is let's get to know the fan on a really emotional level, invite them in, share in these experiences, incentivize them, build some brand loyalty. That's the way to do it.
Awesome. Okay, so there's a couple things I want to dig in on there. You talked about social media. I think with the internet, with social media, with fantasy, like fantasy football and things like that, these have been hugely disruptive to sports and how people consume professional sports, and how people engage with teams and sports brands. So how can you mentioned, there's a lot of people, they're not even necessarily paying attention to the game, they're just trying to get like something for their Instagram. On the other hand, that maybe brings in people who wouldn't normally go to a game. But I think there's a lot of noise, and I don't know if this is accurate, but I've heard that a lot of, especially the younger generation, like Gen Z, have not been quite as engaged as previous generations, because there's just maybe they don't have the attention span to watch a game. Maybe they're just, because they have their attention so divided. How can we better engage people in the younger demographics, and what can brands do? I would argue that everything now is social, everything now is digital content. And even when you say content, it's got to be filtered through platforms like TikTok, Instagram. This is where, for better or worse, people are. So how can sports brands or teams rather, or leagues like NFL, NHL, NBA, how can they do a better job of storytelling and keeping people connected um, through social media and other today's dominant platforms?
Understand social media's place. It could certainly help amplify what you're doing, but it's not creating those wholesome experiences. There's really, in the sense of building community, I think there's a more simplistic, curated experience, or a custom, bespoke platform that are starting to get made, and that's sort of, brings back to some of the startup work that I'm doing. There's platforms that have a purpose, where they're really tailored around leveraging CRMs and analytic tools that teams are already using, and getting them to embrace the fan voice more. the user generated content that's on everyone's cell phone is very powerful. So if the teams themselves were not worried about creating content, but really reaching the right people, the right influencers, the people that want to contribute, and really invite them in to tell stories and help shape campaigns. That's really the magic that can happen, where you'll start really getting a little bit more authentic voices that are telling you, hey, we have this opportunity or these great ideas. And that's what marketing is about, is, yeah, how do you, with one thing, to get healthy returns on your investment, but the other thing too is you want to attract good sponsors to up fan engagement in venue, at watch parties, at bars and restaurants, all throughout the ecosystem. That's not just on social media. That's also, with a newsletter. You got to get understanding of what people consume. Is it just highlights? Is it long form? Is it short form? Do they like to do their own podcasts? That's really the secret sauce, is get that collaborative formula together with a fan, and really that fan will then echo what they're doing. They have opportunities to do some cross promotion and to be incentivized to, stay with the team and build and scale these new opportunities. Get involved with the stuff happening in the blockchain, AR, VR worlds. There's a whole opportunity that really is tailored to these content creators. You mentioned the Gen Z. Well, Gen Alpha is not too far behind. I mean, there are kids that grow up with iPads and are getting involved on all sorts of
iPad
streaming.
kids.
Yeah, the iPad kids, the iPad generation, exactly. And that's the other thing too, the games that you mentioned, the fantasy sports, that's a little bit older. But the gambling aspects, the sports books that are being part of venues and
Oh yeah,
teams.
DraftKings. I mean, yeah, a lot. There's a betting.
So
Okay, so
it's, yeah,
yeah,
go
there's
ahead.
a number of. So I guess what I'm getting taking from what you're saying is there's a number of within the community. There are a lot of like splinter. Like there are a lot of different ways to create community around sports and around teams. It's not just like okay, the fans and they watch the game, or even tailgating or going to certain sports bars. There's also betting pools. There are or fantasy leagues. There are people who like to consume from short form YouTube Shorts or Instagram Shorts. There's the social piece. There's the different fan pages and like I think that you nailed it. That is the difference between today's marketing versus a generation ago. Everything is two-way conversation rather than just broadcasting and showing, okay, this is what happened. This is, just sports news. Now we have more of a two-way conversation where you can get, like you said, user-generated content, the influencers, the podcasters, not just the journalists talking to the fans, but the fans are now part of the ecosystem of the sports marketing. Like they are part. You're basically you having the fans are being brought in to the marketing itself and taking a more active role in creating community. And you're kind of as the marketers steering them, leading them, or following their lead in some cases, and just amplifying that. Um, and also I would another point with so many people like not going out and everything being remote and all this, of course you can consume sports remotely, but I think that sense of community, whether it's online or offline, is it's hugely valuable and it's also more of a challenge, of course. One question I had for you, obviously we've had these sports betting and fantasy and all that for a long time. But have you felt that, or is there any evidence that's weakened team loyalty? Because sometimes people are like they're more concerned about individual players, and that's another thing that could be a whole nother podcast, the personal branding of individual players and how they tweet and on their Instagram and all like players now have that wasn't as back then you had a player who represented a certain brand because they were a spokesperson, but now they've made their own personal brands. But how has that affected like team loyalty when people are more focused sometimes about the stats of individual players?
Well, I mean, it goes both ways. You can either become a more super user of that app and that brand, and now, hey, I not only follow this tight end because he's valuable for me to have on my fantasy team, but because he's awesome and making big plays, I'm watching more of Team X. So now you realize all the other things that are happening, the other personalities, so you can really forge a little bit more of that overindulgence, or you've now built a fan from just getting involved with one player, or
Mm,
being interested in one player. But on the flip side, right, there's a lot of complications to, hey, I'm only going to get someone's attention for 2 minutes or 3 minutes. They're not only big gamblers and going on the sports book or playing fantasy sports. They're gamers themselves. They play with their friends, after school, or if they're in college, they find time to do some partying. There's all sorts of things that are happening. So you really want to capture the attention through some targeted programs and marketing, and really say, all right, we're interested to know how you want to either opt in. Is it a newsletter? Is it a blog? Do you like going to games? By the way, are you in market? I mean, there's lots of fans that are transplanted that are only engaged with their favorite teams on social media because they don't have the chance to go see them live in person.
right.
So there's all sorts of things that you
It's
have
very
to
expensive
really,
now for a lot of places to see the game. I
and
think a lot of people I know it's through watching with friends or either in person on the couch, or they're like messaging each other during every play, or with other people on like a live stream, watching, maybe they're talking with other people on Twitter or X, whatever, or other platforms. But one interesting thing, I think it's kind of interesting and ironic, is that the primary way it seems that people are getting more the way brands are getting people more engaged with sports teams and with team sports is often now through individual players, individual influencers. Sometimes people get, like you said, hooked, and then through that they get more interested in the team or the franchise, and then hopefully not only buy tickets to go to the game, but buy merch and memorabilia and other great things. Where couldn't people find you, or if they want to work with you? Um, and also, is there anything interesting you're working on now that you'd love to share with my audience?
yeah, I mean, a lot of my ethos and MO is tied back to sports, and even at the grassroots level. So I'm doing lots of events with the Sports Philanthropy Network. We have an event coming up in late February. So that's a piece that I'm active about, intentional on LinkedIn. I'm very active and love to go to other events. So LinkedIn's always a good opportunity to engage, be part of the conversations. I love getting messages and comments about things that I'm committed to or projects I'm working on. But certainly, yeah, HabermanDigital.com is my domain, my website, and yeah, I'm on X, and I kind of check things out from time to time. But I've definitely pumped the brakes on my X engagements. It's really, yeah, LinkedIn and good healthy in-person networking.
Awesome. Love it, Daryl. So I'm gonna link all that information, your LinkedIn, the Sports Philanthropy Network. If you all want to learn more about it, it'll be linked in the show notes. And thank you so much, Daryl. This was really a pleasure, and I hope to have you back on soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me again.